Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give another half a minute to people as they're logging on, and then I will introduce His Excellency Abdalla Shaheen. So just giving it a few seconds. I know we're all doing webinars these days, and I'm always signing on just at the hour that it's going to be. So it seems to, I don't know, that seems how to be with the rush of life. So why don't we go ahead and start? And my name is Simin Curtis, and I run the American Middle East Institute. We are headquartered here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but we are a national organization, and we work to build business, educational, and cultural ties with the countries of the Middle East and North Africa. And we have had the opportunity to host many delegations from the Middle East, and have taken many delegations to that region. And I would like to mention that one of the highlights for the delegations I've taken over to the Middle East and North Africa is taking a group from our region to the UAE in late 2018. We brought the mayor of Pittsburgh, William Peduto. He will be actually speaking at our advanced manufacturing session at 12:30 today. So if you haven't signed up for that, you may wish to do that. He will open our session on advanced manufacturing, as I mentioned, at 12:30. But we had a tremendous opportunity to introduce some of our robotics companies and advanced manufacturing companies to some of our friends in the UAE when we took the delegation over there. And we are just delighted to be able to partner with the U.S. U.A.E. Business Council to host His Excellency Abdalla Shaheen, who is the Consul General of the UAE in New York. And he is, His Excellency is going to speak, sort of give an overview of doing business in the Middle East, and excuse me, doing business in the UAE. I would say that His Excellency works to promote the very important bilateral connections between the UAE and the United States. And he works on business and cultural ties and is located in New York and serves the Eastern US region. He's also a liaison for US corporations and government officials, and is a resource for the UAE nationals that live in the East Coast area. His Excellency Consul General Shaheen has worked on many amazing projects. He's worked closely, for example, with Her Excellency Reem Al Hashimi, who is the UAE Minister of State for International Cooperation. And in this capacity worked on many projects, including the amazing Expo 2020, which was to open this fall and has been pushed to 2021. And I am personally excited to go to that expo when it does open. There will be a big US pavilion, and it's very exciting what's planned there. We won't always be under the thumb of this virus, so I'm hopeful about all of that. His Excellency has also worked with His Highness Sheikh Abdullah bin Zayed Al Nahyan, who is the UAE Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and was actually his Deputy Chief of Staff in 2012. We are so pleased to have you here with us today, Your Excellency, and to give us an overview about doing business in the UAE. I understand you're from Sharjah, and we, as I was mentioning earlier before everyone joined, we had a lovely delegation come from Sharjah, one of the Emirates of the United Arab Emirates, last fall. And that was with Danny's help, who's also pictured on the screen. And so I will just turn it over to you, and I will just say to our listeners that if you have questions, they may be submitted throughout through the chat function. If you scroll down to your screen, you will see a Q&A, and you can actually leave some questions there. So without further ado, Your Excellency, I'd like to turn it over to you for your remarks.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Simin. Good morning to everyone joining us from Pittsburgh region and across the state of Pennsylvania. Hope everyone has been safe and well during these uncertain times. I would like to start today by thanking Simin, Danny, and their teams at American Middle East Institute and the U.S U.A.E. Business Council for organizing this timely virtual event. I'm honored and excited to participate in today's webinar. While the coronavirus pandemic prevented me from conducting my first scheduled trade mission to Pennsylvania this past spring, I look forward to the opportunity to meet with you all in person as soon as it's safe to do so. While we must meet virtually today, I believe that these online engagements are critical to keeping the conversation moving in the wake of COVID-19. And I hope you find today's discussion informative and useful. Before we begin, I would like to provide some background about the UAE Consulate in New York City and the UAE relationship with the state of Pennsylvania. In light of our current situation, I also wanted to share important steps the UAE is taking to support the wider business community as we seek to adopt and rebuild from the impact of COVID-19. Since opening in 2016, the Consulate of United Arab Emirates in New York has become a key driver of a rapidly expanding bilateral relationship. While we are based in New York, the consulate also serves 15 other US states across the Eastern Seaboard, including the state of Pennsylvania. One of our main functions at the consulate is to promote to a greater understanding and unity between United Arab Emirates and Americans. We do this through building community programs and raising awareness of Emirati art and culture, as well as by organizing events, delegations, and high-level meetings between government officials and business leaders to explore issues of mutual concern to people in both countries. Today's gathering reflects our broader commitment to making doing business in the UAE as attractive, transparent, and straightforward as possible. The UAE maintains a strong and dynamic relationship with the state of Pennsylvania. Over the past 4 years, Pennsylvania has exported $1.6 billion worth of goods and services to the UAE, the 15th highest export total of all 50 states. This robust trade relationship supports over 2,000 jobs in Pennsylvania across a wide range of sectors, including healthcare, manufacturing, education, real estate, and chemicals. Some of you today may be familiar with Nova Chemicals, which is owned by Abu Dhabi Mubadala Investment Company. We at the consulate look forward to further enhancing UAE economic ties with Pennsylvania and all our US partners, particularly as we approach the 50th anniversary of the UAE founding in 2021. We are particularly interested in exploring partnership with firms that are innovating at the cutting edge of the fourth industrial revolution in areas such as artificial intelligence, robotics, data science, and space exploration. In fact, I'm proud to share that this week, the UAE plans to launch our first mission to Mars. The Emirates Mars Hope probe is scheduled to enter Mars orbit early next year, in time for the UAE's 50th anniversary. The success of this 6-year project has demonstrated the UAE potential to thrive in knowledge-based economy, and it will have a huge impact on the growth of new industries in the UAE and the greater Middle East region for years to come. Looking ahead, next year in October will also mark the opening of Dubai Expo, the first world fair to be held in Middle East region. I encourage all interested businesses from Pittsburgh to attend and to reach out to the U.S. State Department for more information about how they can participate in the U.S. Pavilion specifically. Lastly, as a global community continues to manage through the impact of the coronavirus pandemic, I would like to highlight some of the measures the UAE has taken to maintain a strong economic environment and support businesses and individuals in need. At the federal level, the Central Bank of UAE has authorized a $70 billion stimulus package that will allow bank and financial institutes to offer continued access to funding for private sector's companies and SMEs. Additionally, the Ministry of Economy has reduced a number of services fees, further enhancing doing business in the process. Beyond the federal level, each of UAE's 7 emirates has enacted additional measures to safeguard businesses and individuals in line with local situations. Finally, the UAE cabinet has recently undergone a major reshuffle aimed at positioning our business environment for future success. A few key adjustments include the appointment of 2 additional ministers of economy for international trade and SMEs, and the creation of a Ministry of Industry and Advanced Technologies. These are just few of the steps we have taken to support businesses, and the UAE will continue to introduce appropriate measures to maintain a strong and resilient business environment that will flourish in the future. I hope that you all will leave today's event with a better understanding of the new market opportunities that are emerging in the UAE. Should you have any questions after today's event or require support opening your business in the UAE, please feel welcome to reach out to the UAE consulate or the business council directly. Our team will be happy to assist you, and I'm sure Danny's team will be happy to assist you too. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. Appreciate your remarks and really just how much opportunity there is in the UAE, what a welcoming country you have, all the different projects that are going on. My goodness, a probe to Mars and celebrating your upcoming 50th anniversary. It's truly impressive, and we're delighted to have you here talking about the opportunities in your country. And we hope we can bring delegations there and host more from your country. I would like to actually now introduce Danny Sebright, who is the president of the U.S U.A.E. Business Council. And we are proud to be partnering with Danny and his organization to mount this webinar. And Danny, in my opinion, leads one of the best business councils around. And he is the most active, it's one of the most active councils. There are countless webinars and different events that Danny holds. And he really does a great service of building these kinds of connections between our countries. He has had a great deal of government service. He worked as a at the geostrategic advisory firm, the Cohen Group, from 2002 to 2016. He has served in the office of the Undersecretary for Policy at the Department of Defense. He has many awards. He's very accomplished in the things he's done for both our government and also his work at the U.S U.A.E. Business Council. And I'm as I mentioned, proud to be partnering with Danny to mount this webinar on the virtual trade mission to the UAE. So Danny, without further ado, please, please join in.
Thank you, Simin. Very much appreciate the very warm welcome. And I just have to underscore, while His Excellency Abdalla Shaheen is still on the call, how wonderful AMEI is to work with. We've been out to visit with you a number of times, most recently the one you mentioned in Sharjah. And as a result of your efforts to educate us on how important Pittsburgh is and what's going on in the greater Pittsburgh area with regard to education, healthcare, tech, Pittsburgh and the greater Pittsburgh area is one of our top 10 priorities for our outreach across the United States. It's very important. What you all are doing there is very innovative. Your connection between industry, government, and education, the think tanks, the tech institutes, is just critically important to the future of what we need to be doing in the United States. And Simin, your organization, I just hats off to all that you're doing to create that awareness. If you're not a member of Simin's organization in the greater Pittsburgh area, you definitely need to be. And that very strong endorsement from our side. And then Consul General Shaheen, I know wants to get out there to visit very soon. I know that Pittsburgh is working on putting together the next version of GMIS for next year, hopefully, and we all are very excited to be able to work on that project going forward. Thank you to your teams. Thank you to Maria Wagley at the AMI, and to obviously Mason and to Ibrahim at the U.S. Consul General's office for all, or the UAE Consul General's office, excuse me, for all of your help on putting these webinars together. I'm going to quickly go through a slide presentation. We'll run through it very fast. If we could have up slide 1 and slide 2, that would be great. We'll quickly go through it, and then we'll have some questions at the end. So if we go to slide 2 right away, there we go. That's slide 1, there's slide 2. Let me just say a few quick words. The Business Council has over almost 200 members now. It's approximately 150 there, but it's really closer to 200 at this point. We were created in the middle of a crisis, the Dubai Ports World crisis in the U.S., with the goal of building better understanding between our two countries of the commercial and trade opportunities and the importance of the overall relationship. Over the last number of years, we've done as many as 50 to 60 in-person events a year, but obviously in the COVID time, as I like to call it, the time of COVID, we've pivoted and we are doing a lot more virtual teleconferences with prominent U.S. and UAE business leaders and government officials. We've hosted webinars with the CEOs of the two airlines, Etihad and Emirates, who both airlines have been critically important during this time to keeping food and medicine flowing. We've hosted webinars with the UAE ambassador to the U.S., Yusuf Al-Taiba, the U.S. ambassador to the UAE, John Ricolta, and their teams, the leadership from Mubadala, major U.S. tech companies, the UAE Minister of State for Food Security, and so many more. We have really tried to pivot in this time of COVID, to the virtual environment until the time when we can meet face-to-face, as His Excellency said, and bring a trade mission from Pittsburgh back to the UAE, which is very much part of what this program is all about. If we could go to the next slide, please. I like to refer to the U.S.-UAE relationship as resting on 3 major pillars: a political relationship, a military relationship, and an economic relationship. I'm going to focus today on the economic relationship really quickly. If we could go to the next slide. There's just the next slide, please. And then a few points on the defense relationship, and then the next slide, please. The economic foundation of the relationship is incredibly sturdy. As His Excellency mentioned, over the past decade, trade between the U.S. and UAE has grown 40% to reach $24.3 billion in 2019. Even during COVID, The numbers are strong so far for 2020 and the first half of the year. In 2019, the U.S. exported $20 billion to the UAE, and in 2019 alone, Pennsylvania exported $223.4 million in goods and services. Top U.S. exports to the UAE include aircraft, electrical machinery, vehicles, precious metals and stones, and agricultural products. And we have to underscore tech and healthcare, two huge growing verticals in our relationship between the two countries. Meanwhile, UAE exports to the U.S. have grown substantially also. In 2019, the UAE exported to the U.S. what amounted to about $4.3 billion, and one of the key exports is alumina, and as His Excellency noted, petrochemical downstream, like the work with Nova Chemical. When you do the math, the U.S. trade surplus with the UAE is one of the largest globally, and in 2019, the U.S. enjoyed a $15.7 billion trade surplus with the UAE. Very, very important. Next slide. Beyond bilateral trade, the UAE has invested significantly in the United States. According to Select USA, the total stock of UAE FDI in the United States in 2018 amounted to $26.7 billion. These figures haven't been updated yet for 19. The top sectors were financial services, transportation, consumer products, aerospace, food and beverage, and real estate. Total UAE investments in the United States are much higher. One UAE sovereign wealth fund alone, Mubadala Investment Company, has invested roughly $100 billion in the United States, or over 40% of its $250 billion portfolio. These investments include a $15 billion investment in Global Foundries fab facility in Malta, New York, a significant real estate investment in Las Vegas, Nevada, and more other investments in American tech and healthcare around the country. In turn, U.S. entities have invested broadly in the UAE. Amazon recently bought local online retail site Souq.com for $580 million. Uber bought ride-sharing service Careem for $3.1 million. Very, very steady, safe investments by American companies in the Middle East marketplace. Could we go to slide 8, please? So the UAE's economy is diversifying. The whole point of their economic program over the last 10 years has to diversify the economy from oil and gas. Oil exports have historically underpinned the UAE economy and are still very important. The UAE produced around 3 million barrels per day of oil for the last 7 years. Before the pandemic and subsequent OPEC Plus agreement, the UAE production eclipsed 4.2 million barrels per day. Now it is producing around 2.4 million barrels per day. However, the UAE has successfully diversified its economy into a number of new verticals, becoming a regional hub for travel, tourism, retail, trade, finance, and healthcare. For the future, there is a huge focus on creating high-tech IPR in a number of verticals in the UAE and having Dubai and Abu Dhabi and the other Emirates be a base for the creation of this IPR. Dubai International Airport is the world's busiest airport for international travel, and Emirates Airline has become a worldwide brand. Dubai is famous for landmarks such as the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world, and with all of its glitz and glamour. The Emirate of Sharjah is famous for its education and its art and its Arab language contributions to the world. Shoppers from around the world flock to Dubai, home of the world's largest mall. Jebel Ali Port is the regional transport shipment hub, and Dubai International Financial Center is home to most major international financial institutions. But Abu Dhabi is making huge strides in this area as well, creating Abu Dhabi Global Markets, Abu Dhabi Cleveland Clinic, Abu Dhabi New York University, and a number of other huge important investments in Abu Dhabi. The UAE continues to be intentional about building an economy based on knowledge, technology, and skilled labor. These are the hallmarks of what the UAE is trying to accomplish in the future. Next slide, please. Let me just touch quickly on opportunities for doing business in the UAE. The Business Council's programming and membership base are a great reflection of those areas in which there are opportunities for American companies to do business today in the United Arab Emirates. Traditionally, our most important verticals have been aerospace and defense, energy, financial services, infrastructure, and logistics. That said, as I've mentioned a number of times, our biggest growth areas have been healthcare and technology in the last 3 to 4 years. This demonstrates the UAE's focus on these areas. It also reflects the fact that no country can truly match U.S. capabilities in these areas, and why Pittsburgh is such an important partner for the UAE going forward in advanced manufacturing, in high tech, and healthcare and life sciences. One of our newest focus areas is also food security. The UAE appointed a Minister of State for Food Security a few years ago. We have partnered with this ministry and this minister on a very successful food security mission in February, and hosted the minister on a webinar in May. Food security is one of those areas, alongside healthcare, technology, and space, as His Excellency mentioned, that was identified by both the U.S. and the UAE governments as an area for greater cooperation and an important intergovernmental dialogue, the economic policy dialogue that occurred just a couple of weeks ago. We are planning a lot more activities in this area, and Simin, if you have companies in Pittsburgh that are leaders in food security technologies or processes, we would love to have an opportunity to speak with them and tell them about some of the work and some of the opportunities. How to do business in the UAE. The UAE has worked very hard. If we could go to slide 7, please, the next slide, to create, oh, I'm sorry, let's go, that was the food security mission, I missed that. Let's go to the next one. There we go. How to do business in the UAE. The UAE has worked very hard to create a welcoming environment to conduct business. The UAE is ranked #1 in the Middle East and 16th in the World Bank's Doing Business Index. This is really critically important. The dirham is pegged to the dollar, and the UAE does not restrict profit transfer or capital repatriation. The UAE does not level individual income tax or federal corporate taxes, save for on branches of foreign banks and oil-producing companies. The UAE has myriad free trade zones that are exempt from other forms of taxation. The biggest question that American companies have when deciding to set up shop in the UAE is where to do it and how to do it. A business can be licensed through the economic department of one of the Emirates, or can be established in a free trade zone. The first we say is onshore, the second we say is offshore. Free zones allow for LLCs that are 100% foreign-owned, but that said, companies operating in free zones have traditionally been restricted from engaging in certain activities onshore on the UAE mainland. Moreover, the UAE is going through a process of relaxing foreign ownership and allowing 100% ownership of companies on the mainland, and that's a process that's ongoing. Should you be interested in reading more about how to do business in the UAE, the Business Council recently updated and released its 3rd edition of its Guide to Doing Business in the UAE. The report can be found on the Business Council's website, USUAEbusiness.org, and we're happy to get that to you as a PDF, or if you can't access it directly on the website, which you should be able to. Next slide, please. Just quickly, a little bit about the impact of the pandemic. I would be remiss if I did not mention that the impact of COVID-19 on the UAE economy has been significant. His Excellency mentioned a number of measures and steps that the UAE government, Abu Dhabi and Dubai, are taking to right the ship, if you will, moving forward and create opportunities for recovery. The pandemic has certainly hit the UAE economy hard, as it deeply affected its 3 most important industries: oil and gas, tourism, and hospitality. That said, the UAE is in a very good position to weather the crisis, and as a result of its accumulated assets in sovereign wealth, it's very well positioned to invest funds to move the economy forward. But I just have to mention a word about Etihad and Emirates, in particular Etihad with regard to commercial aviation. Etihad's direct feeder for folks that want to travel from Pittsburgh to the UAE would obviously be Chicago and Washington, D.C., and also New York, JFK. Etihad currently operates out of New York, JFK, and Chicago for the United States. Flights will resume from Washington, D.C., Dulles Airport on the 3rd of August. So those 3 hubs, if you will, will be fully up and running again by early August. On board its flights, Etihad currently applies social distancing measures by means of spacing between seats. The airline also provides special wellness kits, including non-latex gloves, face masks, and hand sanitizers for every guest. Emirates has undergone similar changes and implemented similar procedures. Emirates is operating point-of-origin flights from Dallas, Fort Worth, Houston, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Fort Lauderdale, and Orlando, including passengers originating from California, Florida, and Texas, connecting to an Emirates flight from any of the worldwide locations to Dubai. Both of these airlines have really gone above the par, if you will, to be reliable, provide reliable forms of getting goods and services, healthcare product, patients, repatriating American citizens and Emirati citizens back and forth during COVID. Really amazing opportunities and really amazing services that they've provided to the community. So we want to thank Etihad and Emirates for all that you've done. Next slide. It says here that I'm supposed to stop screen sharing, Simin, and turn it back over to you for the Q&A. So I think we'll stop there. And thank you very much. And I appreciate, again, the opportunity to speak with you all today.
Danny, thank you so much. I mean, that was a very informative slideshow. Is it, will this be available, will this be posted anywhere or available to our listeners?
It's over to you. You have it. I think Maria has it. You guys are welcome to post it as you see fit. And we also have it up on our website. Our website is very extensive, and almost 99% of what we do is there and open for everybody to utilize, whether you're a member company or not.
Well, thank you. Those were very informative remarks. Is His Excellency Shaheen still on the chat, on the webinar?
I think he had a call this morning, Maria, from the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and they asked him to speak at 9:30, so he won't be on the chat
okay.
Going forward. But I think he's going to come back at 12:30 for the other session, as we discussed. I'm happy to field any questions, or if I don't have the answer, we'll get them. We can help you get the questions to him and get them answered that way to himself and his team.
Oh, of course. Okay, of course, that would be great. Well, I had a few questions just about, since we're headquartered here in Pittsburgh, I had some questions that were specific to our city, but we are a national organization, and some of these questions are, could be for just American companies in general. I mean, one of my questions was about, the amazing robotics and material science and advanced manufacturing that takes place here in Pittsburgh. Other places around our country, I mean, we've been we fought a World War II that was nothing but advanced manufacturing. I mean, but specific to Pittsburgh, more steel was produced here right in Pittsburgh than all of the than Germany and Japan combined. I mean, it was just such a powerhouse. So we have a long history of advanced manufacturing and material science, and now we're seeing incredible robotics innovations. The first robotic car was actually invented here decades ago at Carnegie Mellon University by Red Whittaker, and now we have more driverless car research centers in Pittsburgh than any place in the world. And so, Uber and Argo AI, for example, are located here, and a number of others. So I guess I'd like to emphasize our interest in building these partnerships with the UAE in robotics and AI. And if you have anything to say about, how companies can connect with you and folks that might wish to invest in their companies, promote this kind of relationship in this high technology environment.
So first, thank you, Simin, for that question. First, let me offer a few words about UAE government policy writ large on this, in this vertical, in this sector. Understanding the importance of AI a couple of years ago, the UAE created a Minister of Artificial Intelligence, the first ever in the world, to highlight and focus the attention and importance of this sector. Just recently, the UAE government undertook a reorganization to make itself more agile and even more forward-looking than it was. It just did this reorganization on July 5th, and we have a paper on our website, actually, that we just published yesterday on the reorganization. But Minister Olama, the Minister of AI, a portfolio was vastly expanded to include oversight and work on the broad vertical of digital going forward. We've had a number of meetings with him. He is amazingly forward-looking, you know, one of the UAE's top visionaries, I would say. My suggestion to you, and his team as well, he's put together just a crackerjack team around him to help him with this mission. My suggestion to you is that we consider a virtual mission with his team of companies that are, and especially your research institutes at the universities, and some of the companies that are interested in learning more directly from them. What are their focus? We had a session a month ago with the Dubai Future Foundation, which is under him, and you might find that on our website as well. That focused on what has the UAE learned from COVID-19? What's the pivot? What are they going to do next? What are their priorities for the next few years as a result of lessons learned from COVID-19? And I would suggest to you that that's a very, very important place to start, is connecting more with them. And another would be connecting, obviously, with our dear, dear friend, his cousin, Badr Olama, who is based in Abu Dhabi, who runs GMIS and works at Abu Dhabi, especially as it comes to regarding advanced manufacturing, 3D printing, robotics, and some of those things for the future. And we could have a mini virtual trade mission with him. I'm just talking about things that we can do in the next 6 months. I don't see us, I'm not optimistic that we're all going to be traveling that much for another 6 months, but there's a lot we can do in the next 6 months to prepare and get ready for when we will travel again, for sure. So there's a lot we can do and prepare to get ready for when we do travel again. So those are my suggestions.
No, those are great suggestions. And for those who don't know, GMIS, that Danny referred to, stands for the Global Manufacturing and Industrialization Summit, which is a UAE initiated project, and it involves a giant summit that usually takes place every year. It was to have taken place in Hanover this year. Last July it was in Russia. So this year was Hanover, Germany. Of course, it had to be moved to the cloud because of the coronavirus. So we're hoping to have something, have GMIS do something here in Pittsburgh. There's a lot of potential, especially with their focus on the fourth industrial revolution and all of these advanced processes and technologies that are being developed, applied to manufacturing. I mean, it's really, it's a whole new world. It's amazing. So I love your idea of a virtual trade mission to the UAE related to AI, because that's the name of the game these days. It's in every industry. There's machine learning, there's robot. I mean, it's just moving at a phenomenal pace. And here we are in the center of it.
I mean, we have friends on the phone from some of the healthcare institutes and institutions like Cleveland Clinic and others there in Pittsburgh. And I would say to you that AI is even more important right at this moment, critically in healthcare, than in any other vertical. So opening the prism as wide as possible for how AI can impact these different verticals is very, very important.
Well, absolutely. And just speaking about healthcare, I know that telemedicine has just shot off the charts during this coronavirus. I mean, there are so many, there are thousands of patients who connect with their doctors now via telemedicine and take pictures of, some ailment they have, and can get they can really get some one-on-one advice from their physicians. So that's been a good thing with technology applied to healthcare during this trying time. And speaking of healthcare, here in Pittsburgh, we have a great deal of healthcare expertise. We're home to the largest healthcare provider in the United States, which is UPMC, stands for University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And there have been so many breakthroughs. In polio vaccine was first invented here, and there's transplant medicine was developed here by Thomas Starzl, and many, many other such things. Pittsburgh has a special expertise in metabolic diseases, and these are some things that afflict also some of the countries of the Middle East. And so I'd like to just ask how we can advance the partnership between the UAE and our region in healthcare. You had mentioned doing something focused on the AI. We could also do something focused on healthcare. Just was wondering if you wanted to say anything about that, Danny.
Sure, happy to. Of course, over the last 10 years, the UAE has pivoted from being a country that sent all of its patients to the United States and Europe for healthcare, and wants to bring the best-in-class world healthcare back to the UAE and have it be there. I mean, the leader, the hallmark of that is obviously what Cleveland Clinic has done in Abu Dhabi with their amazing hospital and institution. But there's so much more. The UAE has done so much more, and bringing healthcare cooperation and participation into the UAE from the United States. And there's so many more opportunities for healthcare partnership going forward. They're investing. The UAE is investing money in small startups in the U.S. Across the verticals of tech, with healthcare tech being the one that they're investing the most in. So again, that's very, very important. There's a lot of different ways we can connect with the healthcare sector in the UAE. We're very well connected in Abu Dhabi and in Dubai and at the federal level. The more as I was sitting here thinking about my recommendation for a virtual mission, in that sector, we could do one that's in the two sectors. We might even ask. I'm shy about saying this without getting his permission first, but we might even suggest that this would be a great place and a great way for Consul General Shaheen to lead a mission, a virtual mission, in a couple of these verticals with you, in partnership with us and with you, of course. If we can't do it face-to-face and we can't travel there, I think I can work with him to twist his arm. I don't think I'll have a hard job of that, of why it would make sense to do it virtually. So let's try to look at that as well for the near term, for the next 6 months.
That sounds wonderful. I thought I could try to ask a question from one of our from some of our listeners. One is, I am interested in the process of showcasing our innovations as part of the U.S. Pavilion at the Dubai Expo 2020, which, as I mentioned earlier, has been moved to the fall of 2021. And they would like to know what are the next steps for something like that. Do you have any advice about that, Danny?
Sure. Look, we've worked with the Expo with Reem Al Hashimi, Her Excellency Reem Al Hashimi, and her team since the very beginning, almost 9 years ago, and when it was just a dream in the eye of the UAE and Dubai to do this. And there are amazing opportunities for the U.S. For U.S. companies, U.S. institutions, healthcare, educational, what have you, to participate. I would say to you at this point, the best way to do that is to connect, and we can help anyone do this, to connect with the U.S. State Department's Expo unit. They forward deployed officially a unit to the U.S. consulate in Dubai about 6 months ago. Ambassador Ricolta was named officially about 3 or 4 months ago as the Commissioner General, dual-hatted as the U.S. Ambassador and now the Commissioner General for the U.S. Pavilion. And the U.S. Pavilion team has now gone out and is working with a number of companies. They have 3 or 4, I believe, on contract now to help them with programming, with content, with volunteers, all of those various aspects of how you would run a successful pavilion at Expo. And I think we could help any company working with you, Simin, to help them connect with the right office in the U.S. government, which is at the State Department, on Expo for U.S. opportunities at the U.S. Pavilion. But also, now that we have a reprieve of a year, we have a year more to get U.S. support lined up for broader Expo. There might even be some opportunities to plug more American companies into the broader Expo effort. And we're connected with all of the key offices in the U.A.E. Dubai Expo office, and we can help do that as well.
Well, related to the Expo, and for those of you who may have missed the introduction of His Excellency Abdalla Shaheen, the Consul General, he worked specifically on with Reem Al Hashimi on Expo 2020, and so he is an expert on that, and a great resource.
You're absolutely right, Simin, and he and his team, and thank you for pointing that out. He and his team in New York are very well connected with the Expo unit, with the overall Expo effort, the Dubai U.A.E. Expo effort, and they could be very good conduits into that as well.
We actually had a question from one of our listeners about how Pittsburgh can actually have a special pavilion at the Expo 20, which will now be 2021, and that is definitely something we can work on to make sure that Pittsburgh is well represented there. Do you have any advice about that?
Yeah, with regard to specific representation by cities and states at the U.S. Pavilion, my understanding, again, we need to connect with the U.S. State Department team, but my understanding of what's going to unfold, and this could change because we're now a year away instead of a few months away, but my understanding is that during the course of the 6 months of Expo, there's going to be different weeks that are focused on different verticals. There's going to be different weeks that are focused on very, very unique programming. And it would be a matter of connecting with the U.S. team at the State Department and their subsidiary companies that are working on the programming. Maybe there's a week or maybe there's 2 weeks that makes most sense for Pittsburgh to come and be displayed at the pavilion in some way. There's going to be a significant amount of public space at the pavilion, at the U.S. Pavilion, to hold events, to hold, to do a roundtable, to hold, to do speeches and make remarks, to have hospitality. And I think the best way that would work would be for Pittsburgh, for you and others to come together and book some of the space at the U.S. Pavilion, what that the U.S. Pavilion is offering for this at some key moments during the 6 months of the Expo 2020.
That's great advice, and we can certainly talk more about that, Danny, because I think especially with some of the technology that's being developed here, as I alluded to earlier, in many different sectors, it might make sense to reserve some space at the Expo. I remember when we had our delegation that was primarily from Pittsburgh. We had the mayor of Pittsburgh with us. And we were driving through Dubai and seeing just this vast landscape that is devoted to Expo 2020. So this was in late 2018. And I mean, just the plans for it are just truly astounding. And I certainly hope to be there when they open in 2021. I think that would be a great opportunity to bring a delegation from our region and perhaps have real estate, not real estate, but have a space reserved for the Pittsburgh region.
I wanted to also highlight something very important in that regard. The U.S. Commercial Service and the U.S. Department of Commerce under the Select USA program are also going to be creating specific outreach opportunities, specific programming opportunities at the U.S. Pavilion for American companies, and highlighting during, especially highlighted during some of these thematic weeks that the overall expo is organizing. So that's going to be yet another connection point with the U.S. government on being involved in the U.S. Pavilion.
Wonderful, wonderful. We should talk more about this Expo 2020 or 2021 next fall. I mean, I think there's a lot we can do between now and next fall, and that's very exciting. So I also had a, let's see, we have another question here that's come in. Let me just see if I've missed anything. I had a question about the some of the investments that Mubadala has already made in this region. They own Nova Chemicals, as was mentioned earlier. This is the sovereign wealth fund that has an investment or owns Nova Chemicals, but they also, I believe, have an interest in GE's 3D printing facility, which is near our airport. And you know, as speaking for our region, how can we build upon some of those connections and attract more investment, or, you know, in both directions, how we can build upon that? Well,
again, yes, Mubadala is making a lot of investments in the U.S. in some of these verticals, but so are others. A new organization that's been created recently, Audio, is focused on bringing American companies in some of these verticals and spaces to Abu Dhabi and the UAE, and helping provide seed money and investment there. There's a number of different ways to connect, and I would say again that as part of a focused virtual trade mission, maybe in this vertical, in this space, we could get representatives from some of those offices on the teleconference to help provide pointers, to help provide areas of interest and points of contact for how to follow up, whether that be virtually, whether that be, you know, over the phone, or whether that be leading up to an in-person trade mission sometime next year. But those are all areas where we could help your companies, working with you, help your companies and importantly your tech institutes connect with the right people in the UAE that are focused on this space.
Thank you, Danny. A lot of possibilities, and I look forward to working with you. If you didn't hear me at the very beginning, I can't say enough about Danny Sebright and his organization, the U.S. U.A.E. Business Council. Really one of the best I've worked with, and no one is more knowledgeable and capable and can do than Danny. So I highly recommend what he does, and he is a great resource for building this bilateral relationship between the U.S. and the UAE, which is, if you saw the slides, it's alive and well and growing and very promising. It's great that we have such a connection with friends like this in the Middle East.
Well, Simin, thank you. And it's a team effort. My Vice President, David Greenhaw, Christopher Ulmer, who's going to do the healthcare briefing, Mary Zuccarella, who's going to help with the infrastructure and the tech briefing and manufacturing briefing, and then also Rebecca Roseman on our team, who's responsible for a number of verticals. It's a team effort, and we do have UAE interns on board to help us from time to time. We have a UAE intern helping us right now on a virtual basis. So we're making that work, and it's very interesting the way it's playing out. I would also just want to underscore one final thing about the market in the UAE is it's strong and vibrant and extensive in its own right, but as you know very well, Simin, it is the jumping off point for the broader region. And if you can make it, if you make it in the UAE and you have a touchstone and you're validated in the UAE, every other country in the broader region is going to be immediately interested in you and want to be talking to you as well. So I would just encourage and remind folks that the UAE is this amazing hub, and if you want to be successful in the broader region, be successful in the UAE, and others will be very interested in you.
I want to start singing like that New York song. If I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. So that's very encouraging advice, Danny. So I just wanted to mention that if you haven't registered yet, we do have 2 additional seminars coming up. One at 10, well, just in another half an hour on healthcare and healthcare opportunities in the UAE. And then at 12:30, we will have a session on advanced manufacturing, and this will be also we will be joined by the Mayor of Pittsburgh, William Peduto, who, as I mentioned, has came on our delegation to the UAE in late 2018. And it was just a great opportunity to connect with our friends there, and with Badr Al Ulama of Mubadala. So that was wonderful, and I foresee many positive dividends coming out of all of that. Danny, are there any closing remarks you'd like to make in the minute or so?
No, just to say thank you to you and for the great partnership that we've had with you and continue to have, and I think we've identified some great ways working forward with you and the UAE mission with His Excellency, and we just really appreciate it. This is a true partnership, and we really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Oh, our pleasure, and we thank you for all that you do, and I'm proud to have been able to host our first virtual trade mission and have it be to the UAE, which is very open for business and very welcoming, and makes it easy for U.S. companies. As we saw from your slideshow, as I mentioned, there's just so much going on. Thanks for all you do, and we'll see many of you, I hope, at 10:30, and for our health session, and then again at 12:30 for our advanced manufacturing. Thanks to all of you. Bye-bye.
Take care.